Welcome back to r/JustNoHOA, where people share stories about their crazy homeowner associations that make us feel better about not living in an HOA. And in case you are new around here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join our awesome community. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled HOA Hated My Tank. I am a huge history buff, especially one of World War II. I come from a family of veterans and we are proud of our history serving in the military. I can even trace my family back to fighting in the Civil War. Anywho, I decided one day that I would pull the trigger and purchase something that maybe my wife was upset about. Yes, you heard it right, I purchased a tank. Seems ridiculous, but I had always wanted to own a piece of history this significant. After all, tanks are a huge reason we won World War II. I served in Vietnam when I was young, only around 21 years old. I came out of that and went to school to be an engineer. I have since made a business for myself and earned a good deal of money, even though that I could eventually buy that dream tank. I doubt that it was the same tank, but I have a picture of my uncle standing in front of one. It was an M3 Lee/Grant in a camo outfit with plenty of war wounds covering its metal exterior. It was truly a beauty, and even though it was not one of the beloved M4 Shermans, it is still an important piece of WW2 history. Where did I find a tank, you ask? Well, my buddy did work for a guy out in the boonies who was really old and not in good health. I came over to help him assess a part of the house that was having foundation issues. Being an engineer, sometimes we can be helpful with this kind of stuff. After we were finished dealing with the job, I started chatting with the homeowner about all of his WW2 memorabilia he had around his house, and that is when he suddenly gets a spurt of energy and shows me the tank that he has out in the old barn. I knew that I wanted to buy it off of him, and that is exactly what I did. I went through all the steps with the police and the security forces. I double-checked everything before bringing it home. But I guess I may have forgotten about one huge and glaring issue I would run into once I got the big and beautiful tank home. I live in an HOA neighborhood. I'm not exactly sure how I was expecting them to react, but they were pretty annoyed. Our neighborhood is very nice and the houses are big, and many of us have 3-car garages. I had my new tank parked in my driveway in front of my 3rd garage. As you can imagine, I cannot fit it inside my garage, unfortunately. It was pretty big, and I realized after I brought it home that I would eventually want to move it to my other property a few hours south of us. It's in the countryside and I have a place to keep it where it won't take weather damage. We live in an area that tends to rain often, and I worried about it rusting much more than it already had. I had it in the driveway for about a week before they started sending all of their letters and fines. All of the neighbors came to see it, and several families with children wanted to get a look as well. It was still fully operational but not loaded. The M3 had a large amount of room in it, and it was just a blast bringing the kiddos inside to look at all the knobs and levers. After all, it was awesome seeing them be as excited as I was about my new toy. Everyone thought it was so cool, and I had suddenly become the popular guy in the neighborhood. My wife was quick to tell me when we got the first HOA letter that this was bound to happen. With how picky they are about almost anything, it is no surprise that they didn't want a tank in front of one of the houses. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, in this story I'm not entirely sure on which side of the fence, so to say, I would be on. I can sort of understand that the HOA would be kind of pissed off about this. Anyway, the first few letters stated that the tank needed to be moved due to it being an eyesore, and neighbors were concerned about it accidentally going off. Which is completely false, my neighbors did not care. Also, that it violates the new policy of no cars parked in the driveway overnight. And well, Ripe Stars, that is how quick that can change. Now I'm not on the side of the HOA anymore. Either way, like I said, that was new. I'm pretty sure they made that up just for me. I ignored them at the beginning, but the letters became more frequent and annoying. My wife started getting mad, saying that paying the fines was not worth it. I told her that I would do something about it. Albeit, I was not sure what at the time. So, to be a smartass, plus I wanted to see if I could drive it, I managed to back it up and park it in front of the house on the road. Then I put signs up on it that said "Free tank tours" and decorated it with patriotic streamers and other red, white and blue items. I will admit, I was proud of the work and I did get more tank tours too. My wife was again not happy with me, but she knows me and my sense of humor. She knew I was just stirring the pot, mostly because I didn't appreciate the HOA and their opinion of my wonderful baby. This did not help obviously, which I knew since I was provoking them on purpose. After that, I started receiving actual parking ticket violations, 3 of them in 5 days to be exact. Both my closest neighbors and I wrote emails stating that the tank was something that people enjoyed and that they could maybe make an exception for the piece of history to stay. I also mentioned that I cleared things with the local police and military services before bringing it here to begin with, meaning that I should not be receiving parking tickets in front of my own house. They did not seem to care and only stated that it was the HOA that decided if a car is parked illegally or not, and that clearing it ahead of time with the military services and police did not validate it being in the neighborhood. I started asking if I could park it back in the driveway if they didn't want it on the street, and they said that it would be towed by the end of the week if it wasn't removed from the property. Which I found funny because no normal towing service can put that tank on one of their trucks. Honestly, I was trying to figure out a way to have it transported to my property south of us, but was having issues. The guy who I had used before is frequently out of town for work, which is exactly what was holding me up. I set it up with him to move it, but he still wouldn't be back for another 2 weeks. The HOA was relentless. I'm convinced that some of them did not sleep at night, knowing that my tank was uglying up their precious neighborhood curb appeal. Thankfully, my daughter is good with Facebook and was willing to help me reach out for help with my community, asking them to write to the HOA and see if they would make an exception for such a cool piece of history. It's a damn tank. How can they hate it? It was hugely prolific in the World War II front, and even though it is not an M4, it was still an important part in the outcome of the war. I asked if any of the board members had a relative that fought in the war, trying to get some sympathy from them, but I was only answered with more snarky emails and refusals to bend their rules. It didn't take too long of my story being on our town's Facebook community page before I started receiving more likes, positivity and support. I even put together an event at my house that brought several hundred people over for food, fun and tank tours. Everyone loved it and had a blast. We managed to get a picture with a majority of those who were present. My wife's best friend even took it and had it put on a sign that many people put up in their yards that said, "Save the tank." The HOA was very mean about the signs and made it mandatory that everyone take them down. As much drama as there was over my tank, and I wished that I could leave it in my yard, I knew it still had to go to its permanent home on my country property. My buddy helped me load it up and hauled it down there for me. I cozied her up in the nice warm barn and told her that the HOA could not bully her there. I know that it seemed like the blasted HOA won that fight, but ironically, my tank did not win the war with the HOA board. However, I still feel like I got my payback. Our neighborhood's slimy HOA members were called out by my wife, daughter and community on Facebook, and many people left them a fair amount of nasty messages and other hate mail. It may not seem like much, but ruining the image of people who only care about appearances can taste so sweet. And yeah, ripe stars, if something like this happened in your neighborhood, I am really curious how you would have felt about this. In addition guys, I would once again like to remind you to please turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss any of my videos in case YouTube decides to once again act up. This can really happen at any time, so if you don't want to miss any videos, the bell button is the way to go. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled The Kettle of Helios and Golden Coral. This is a funny story I like to share about my ex-wife. Please excuse my imperfect grasp of Greek mythology. Me and my ex and the kids were at Golden Coral, a semi-cheap all-you-can-eat style restaurant in the US, and when they first had the lemon rosemary butter steak. Basically, every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, dinner was more expensive, but they added things like all-you-can-eat steak, shrimp, Swedish meatballs, for the 4th of July, I don't know, sausage, ribs, etc. And by the way, maybe someone can clarify, what do Swedish meatballs have to do with the 4th of July in the United States? I'm kind of lost there. Maybe someone can tell us in the comments. She stayed at the table with the kids while I fetched plates for everyone. It's self-serve, kids first of course, then back out to get hers and mine. There was a long line for the steak where you would request how you want it and the chef cuts you a piece and puts it on your plate. I got her a steak and sides plus the rolls and her precious honey butter. Everything she requested. I get back to the table and the kids are enjoying their food, but my ex has finished more than half of her steak and is disappointed because it is not rare enough. I cut into mine and it is perfectly pink and juicy. I go to take a single bite and she is literally whimpering because she wants my steak, so I hand it over and take her measly pale grey chunk for myself. This was a common thing and something I would repeatedly ask her to stop the entire decade we were together, but I didn't want to fight about it. So she says, "Just the way I like my steak, mooing." And I cracked up because it reminded me of the Greek legend. She asked what is so funny and I told her. See, in Greek mythology, Odysseus and his crew were starving on their boats, as they often were, when they spotted a perfect green isle covered in these fat, beautiful, healthy cows. They paddled to the shore as fast as they could and were stumbling over themselves to get to the cows, and the cows, being so pampered for so long, did not even put up a fight as they were killed by the dozens. Within an hour, the sailors had a fire going, roasting whole cows while they ate skewered pieces off of smoking pits. Some of the skins were stretched tight to tan in the sun, but some of the sailors just threw them over their shoulders like capes. And as they laughed and ate, they began to notice as the meat started to twitch on their plates. The skins began to writhe and the bones rattled and the cows on the spit screamed. The sailors watched in horror and vomited as the meat in their stomachs squirmed. They had found Apollo's herd of immortal cattle. It was at this point that my ex pushed away my barely touched plate, completely done with the steak for the night. Revenge is a dish best served with lemon rosemary butter and a side of mashed potatoes. And by the way, ripe stars, I'm curious, what is your favorite all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant? I gotta say, in Thailand, these all-you-can-eat buffets, barbecues, or hot pot, what they really like there, are so damn common that I just don't want to go to them anymore. However, my girlfriend really enjoys them. The next one is titled Lost the Hardware. So, my ex and I have been divorced for a couple of years now. When she first moved out, she did not take much. I told her to take her time, she can wait until she finds a permanent place. After a year of living in a rental, she bought her own place. I told her at that time to take whatever furniture and other items that she wanted. She took a few things, but not much. Over the years though, she kept taking things here or there, pretty much whenever she saw something she wanted from my house. I never really minded because it was usually things that I never really wanted to begin with. Now I am remarried and she continues to take things from our house, sometimes without even asking. This really annoys my new wife, which I understand. Finally I told her if she hasn't taken it by now, she is no longer entitled to it. Needless to say, my ex got really upset at this and demanded a couple more items. Some things she asked for I said no to because I knew she didn't need them and she only wanted them to make things difficult on me and my now wife. One of the things she wanted was the frame from our old bed. I had the frame in my storage room and was not using it. Whatever, take it. After she took it, I noticed she put it up for sale right away for about 1/10 of what I paid for it. Whatever, fine, she can get a few bucks for it. She just showed me she never really wanted it and my ex was just being petty. The next time she came over, I noticed some pictures of the kids missing. This pissed me off. I asked her about it and she denied taking them. However, one of my kids said the pictures were now in their mother's house. This was more of an annoyance for me than anything. I had copies of the pictures stored on my hard drive and got them printed and put into frames. A few days later, my ex asked if I had the hardware to the bed frame she took. I'm assuming she sold it and the buyer wanted the hardware to assemble it. Even though I found the hardware, I said I didn't have it. She can either buy new hardware herself or not sell the bed. Petty deserves petty. Edit: when my ex and I drop off the kids when we exchange, every Sunday we help carry in our kids' things. So she comes into my house and I go into her house. And I gotta say, Ripe Stars, that is a pretty strange relationship dynamic. I certainly would not let my ex-wife, if I had one, take things out of my house. The next one is titled, Always respect your partner when making big decisions or your cat's names might change. In the early spring, my girlfriend's cat died. She was pretty devastated. The poor thing was riddled with lung cancer, it seemed. And the moment it died, it was a pretty horrendous situation, so I will spare the details. Needless to say, my girlfriend was in a pretty bad place. Several days later, when she started to seem more herself, she asked me how I felt about getting another cat. We live together, so it affects me. Since I knew that she was still reeling and there is no way she could love another cat that quickly, also her bank account was emptied out and credit cards maxed out, taking care of her cat through its sickness. So financially, it was not a great decision, and I told her that I wouldn't mind having another cat, but just not yet. Well, we had several arguments about it. Apparently she had already gone and picked out 2 cats and signed up to adopt them. I wanted her to cancel, but she cried and said she needed this to get through her cat's death, and I love her so much, we were not breaking up over this. However, I was not happy that she made a decision like this without truly running it by me and not some courtesy after she had already made up her mind. If anything went wrong, I would be paying for it. She brought home a bonded pair, mother and son, about 1 year old, and a tiny kitten that was just weaned off of milk. Evie and Wally. Cue the petty revenge. It was my intention to get them to like me more. That was the first part. The second and better part was the fact that I could not remember their names. Honestly, I didn't want to. So I started calling them Mother Trucker and Little Poop. In the beginning, just because I didn't remember their names, I had a eureka moment. I could teach them to respond to them. My girlfriend's reactions to hearing me call them that progressed from "that's not their names" to "stop calling them that" to "we need to start using their real names" to "we have to stop calling them that" to "when people ask what their names are, Mother Trucker and Little Poop." In fact, she had a hard time remembering their original names. So while at first they liked me more, they like us about the same now. However, 6 months later, the fact that my girlfriend refers to them by the terrible names that I gave them makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside and makes me feel even for the way their adoption played out. In the end, she even admitted that I was right about holding out on the adoption because she wasn't ready, but today she is happy and they are happy and I am happy. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I can tell you, since JB and I will be moving to the north of Thailand once again very soon in the future, I would say probably in February, we will most likely also be getting a cat, so you might hear the cat in the recordings in the future. But let's see. I'm a huge cat lover, but I don't really need a cat at home. However, JB, since she will quit her job and then also be self-employed, really wants to have a cat and take care of it. So who am I to say no? And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.